The golden gates of the Cooper estate stood wide, welcoming the elite into a world where power met piety, yet the opulence of the afternoon was merely a gilded shroud for the carnage to come. It was a day designed for the history books, a monumental merging of two souls under the sacred banner of marriage. The air vibrated with the sound of string quartets and refined laughter, as the scent of 1,000 white roses masked the metallic tang of the storm brewing just out of sight. At the center of this spectacle stood Raphael Cooper, a titan of industry whose legendary success was matched only by the fierce protective devotion he held for his bride, Glenda Kelly. She was a vision of ethereal grace, her porcelain skin glowing against a gown of intricate lace, appearing to all as the perfect sanctuary for a man whose life had been a relentless war. To the cheering crowd, it was a picture-perfect masterpiece of tradition and triumph. Welcome to Crime Obsession. A huge thank you to my subscribers for your continued support as we grow. We are dedicated to bringing you the best told and untold crime stories every single day. If you're new here, please don't forget to subscribe. Let's continue. Beneath the shimmering surface of this blessed union lay a truth saturated in cold shadows. Unbeknownst to the guests raising crystal flutes to the Cooper's future, a ticking time bomb of biological betrayal was counting down its final seconds. While Raphael beamed with a pride that reached his very soul, looking upon Glenda's visible pregnancy as the crowning achievement of his legacy, a silent collision was already in motion. Standing nearby was Douglas Cooper, the groom's brother, bound to the bride by a secret that turned this day of joy into the chilling prologue of a double funeral. The celebration was an illusion, a fragile mask destined to shatter and transform a night of merriment into a morning of irreversible horror. The empire Raphael Cooper commanded was not a gift of birthright. It was a kingdom clawed out of the jagged grit of the streets. Beneath the pristine silk of his tuxedo, his skin bore the map of his journey. Intricate, ink-etched tattoos and jagged scars that climbed his neck and wrapped around his heavy, powerful hands. Each mark was a testament to a man who had survived the unthinkable to build a fortress of stability that now commanded the absolute respect of his peers. Raphael moved with the stillness of a predator at rest, a king who believed he had finally secured his borders. On this day, he viewed Glenda Kelly as his ultimate reward, the personification of the peace he had spent decades chasing. He looked at her with a blind, adoring trust, convinced that their union was a sacred meeting of souls and the foundation of a royal dynasty. However, the serenity in Glenda's eyes was a masterpiece of deception. Her grace was not born of ease, but was a practiced armor forged in a neighborhood where dreams were frequently strangled by the cold hands of poverty. Glenda had learned as a child that love was a fleeting luxury, a sentiment that could not keep a roof overhead or silence the ache of an empty stomach. Her pursuit of Raphael was never fueled by the heart. It was a calculated recognition of the impenetrable shield his wealth provided. She saw in Raphael's established stature a permanent exit from the struggle of her youth. While Raphael saw a queen to cherish, Glenda saw a provider to manage. She performed her role with surgical precision, offering the warmth and supportive whispers he craved to ensure she was anchored forever in his world. She was a survivalist navigating a world of wolves, and Raphael was the ultimate prize, the man whose success guaranteed she would never be vulnerable again. As they stood in the radiant glow of the altar, Raphael was paralyzed by his own happiness, blissfully unaware that his perfect bride was tallying the cost of her security with the currency of his soul. The shadows of the Cooper estate held a different kind of energy when Douglas entered the frame, a sharp contrast to the polished, immovable stability of his older brother. If Raphael was the stone foundation of the family, Douglas was the flickering flame, unpredictable, magnetic, and dangerously free-spirited. He arrived at the fringes of the celebration not with the calculated poise of the elite, but with a boyish, restless energy that seemed to pull the oxygen out of the room. For Glenda, who had spent months meticulously constructing a life of rigid security with Raphael, the mere sight of Douglas was a jarring reminder of the one thing her wealth could not buy: the thrill of the unplanned. Their first meeting had not been a structured introduction over a mahogany table or a curated dinner. It had been a spontaneous collision, an electric spark that ignored the careful boundaries Glenda had built around her heart. To the world, Douglas was the younger sibling still finding his way, a man whose life was not yet defined by the heavy crown of success that marked Raphael's brow. But to Glenda, he represented a terrifying and irresistible defiance of everything she had planned. While Raphael offered a shield against the uncertainties of life, Douglas offered the uncertainty itself. He possessed a charm that was raw and unstudied, his eyes holding a reflection of the same modest neighborhood struggles Glenda tried so hard to bury. Yet he wore his history with a casual grace that made her own calculated recognition of status feel hollow. When they spoke, the conversation didn't center on legacies or investments. It was a whispered exchange in the dark corners of rooms where the glittering chandeliers of Raphael's world couldn't reach them. The connection between them was a test of how far they could push the boundaries, a reckless dance that quickly turned from a momentary lapse in judgment into an addictive secret. Glenda didn't see Douglas as a prospect for her future. He lacked the wealth and stability she desperately craved, but she found herself unable to let go of the power their connection gave her. He was the opposite of the provider she had found in Raphael, yet the sense of danger that came from their hidden affair provided a different kind of sustenance. For Douglas, the infatuation was deep and captivating. He looked at Glenda and saw a woman who understood his restlessness in a way his brother never could. As Douglas stood in the periphery of the wedding reception, his presence was a ticking time bomb that threatened to shatter the picture-perfect facade of the day. Every time his gaze met Glenda's across the crowded ballroom, the electric nature of their history hummed between them, a silent frequency that defied the sacred union she had just sealed with Raphael. Glenda could feel the weight of his stare, a mix of longing and pain that made the lace of her wedding gown feel like a shroud. She had woven a web to keep both brothers in her orbit, using her charm and wit to ensure Douglas stayed silent while she secured her prosperous future with Raphael. Yet, as Douglas moved closer, the lines between her cold manipulation and the genuine heat of their affair began to blur, signaling that the storm was brewing and the cost of her deception was about to be called due. Glenda moved through the grand reception hall like a master of a silent, high-stakes theater, her every gesture a testament to her ability to play her role to perfection. To Raphael, she was the quintessence of devotion, a supportive partner who seemed to anticipate his every need with a gentle touch or a reassuring smile that never failed to reach his adoring eyes. She was attentive and caring, presenting herself exactly as the woman Raphael needed her to be to maintain his absolute trust. Every time she felt his hand rest protectively on her growing belly, she mirrored his joy, reinforcing the carefully constructed lie that this child was the culmination of their shared future. She understood the power of the facade she had built. For Raphael, there was no room for doubt or suspicion because she had made his world feel so complete. Under the glittering chandeliers, she was the anchor of his success, the radiant bride who promised him a legacy built on stability and love. Yet, beneath this composed exterior, Glenda was navigating a turbulent whirlwind of emotions that threatened to pull her under. While she provided Raphael with the peace he craved, her heart beat to a different, more dangerous rhythm whenever Douglas was in the room. Her relationship with the younger Cooper brother was a chaotic storm of infatuation and intensity, a whirlwind that captivated him and provided her with a sense of control she couldn't find elsewhere. Unlike the calculated security she shared with Raphael, her connection to Douglas was electric and forbidden, a secret affair born in the dark corners where the rules of her new life did not apply. She needed Douglas not just for the physical thrill, but for the power it gave her to keep both brothers entangled in her web. She used every tool at her disposal, her charm, her wit, and even a calculated display of vulnerability, to ensure he felt just enough guilt to stay silent but not enough to walk away. This dance of deceit was a carefully choreographed performance where Glenda held all the strings. She was a survivalist balancing two worlds, one of luxury and prosperity with Raphael, and another of raw, reckless passion with Douglas. The strain of maintaining this duality began to show in small, almost imperceptible ways, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes or a moment of distraction when the weight of the deception felt too heavy. She knew she was walking a tightrope, where one wrong move could bring her entire future crashing down. She had to keep Douglas calm, playing on his emotions and his love for their unborn child to prevent him from doing anything that would ruin the stability she had worked so hard to secure. As the evening unfolded, Glenda continued to weave her web with subtle manipulation. She would pull Douglas aside under the guise of concern, reminding him of the pain the truth would cause and the life they had to protect, all while keeping Raphael blissfully unaware of the unrest simmering just beneath the surface. It was a delicate balance of reassurance and control, a mastery of social grace masking a heart hardened by a childhood of scarcity. To the world, she was the epitome of a happy bride, but in reality, she was the orchestrator of a complex dance, ensuring that the shadows of her past and the secrets of her present remained hidden behind a mask of silk and lace. The confirmation of the pregnancy was the final jagged piece of the puzzle Glenda needed to cement her place in the Cooper dynasty, a biological anchor that would hold her fast against any future storms. Long before the wedding bells tolled, she had looked at the thin lines of the test with a mixture of cold triumph and terrifying clarity. The child she carried was a product of the electric and forbidden nights spent with Douglas, a living testament to a passion that had no place in the structured world she was building with Raphael. Yet, in Glenda's world, truth was a liability that she could not afford to carry. She knew that to survive, the bloodline had to be rewritten. With the precision of a master strategist, she set about the task of maneuvering Raphael into believing the child was his, turning a potential catastrophe into her greatest tool for securing the life she had always dreamed of. She chose her moment with the same care a jeweler uses to set a diamond, waiting for a quiet evening when Raphael was at his most vulnerable, his heart open and his mind filled with thoughts of their impending union. As they sat in the soft glow of his study, surrounded by the leather-bound books and artifacts of his hard-won success, Glenda guided his hand to her still flat stomach. The gesture was tender, seemingly a spontaneous eruption of shared joy, but internally, Glenda was always calculating. She whispered the news with a practiced tremor in her voice, weaving a narrative of a new beginning that was the culmination of their love and the start of their family. Raphael, a man defined by his integrity and a deep protective streak, was instantly overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a father. In that single manufactured moment, his love for Glenda deepened into something immovable. He was blind to the signs, so consumed by the promise of a legacy that he never once questioned the timeline of her story. From that night on, the lie became a daily ritual of reinforcement. Glenda used the child as a shield to protect her from the uncertainties of life, ensuring that Raphael's wealth and stability were now permanently linked to her own well-being. She leaned into the role of the expectant mother with a dedication that was played to perfection, making sure Raphael felt every supposed kick and shared in every doctor's appointment she meticulously curated. To Raphael, this was the bloodline he had worked his entire life to establish, a royal legacy to inherit the empire he had carved out of the grit of his past. He moved through the world with a new sense of purpose, blissfully unaware that the foundation of his happiness was built on a foundation of lies. For Glenda, the deception provided a surge of satisfaction, a sense of absolute control over the two brothers who were now inextricably tied to her future. While Raphael provided the luxury and security she craved, the secret of the child's true paternity acted as a leash on Douglas, keeping him entangled in her web through a mixture of guilt and a shared silent bond. She had effectively commodified the bloodline, turning her unborn child into a ticket out of the life she had always known and into a world of permanent prosperity. As the wedding day approached, the bloodline was no longer just a biological fact. It was the ultimate weapon in Glenda's arsenal, a deception so deep and so personal that it ensured Raphael would never look at her with anything but adoring, unsuspecting eyes. The morning of the wedding dawned with a clarity that felt like a cruel irony to those trapped within the shadows of the Cooper legacy. The estate was transformed into a cathedral of high society opulence, where every flower petal and silk ribbon had been placed to signal a new beginning of grace and celebration. At the center of this sacred theater stood Glenda Kelly, a vision of ethereal beauty draped in a gown of white lace that clung to her figure with deceptive innocence. To the hundreds of guests who watched her glide down the aisle, she was the picture of a blushing bride, her face serene and her eyes fixed on the man waiting at the altar. But beneath that intricate lace, Glenda was hiding a truth that would turn this day of celebration into a night of horror. She was an orchestrator of a complex dance, her every step a calculated move to secure a future of luxury and comfort. Every time she placed a hand over the child she carried, she felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that Raphael looked upon her with a blind, adoring trust, completely unaware that the foundation of their life was built on a lie. Raphael Cooper stood tall at the altar, his heart full and his future bright. To him, this ceremony was the culmination of all his dreams, the moment when his hard-won success finally felt complete. He moved through the day with a lightness of spirit, his adoring eyes never leaving Glenda's face, seeing in her not just a partner, but a provider of the peace he had long sought. He was blissfully unaware of the tension simmering just inches away from him, blinded by a love so all-encompassing that he could not see the cracks in the facade. As the officiant began to speak of union and integrity, Raphael's conviction only deepened, believing that the vows they were about to exchange were the start of a family legacy founded on mutual devotion. Standing beside Raphael as the best man, Douglas Cooper felt the air in the grand hall grow thick and suffocating. While the guests cheered, Douglas was sinking into a pit of anguish, the weight of his secret pressing down on him with a force that made every breath a struggle. Every time Raphael leaned in to whisper to Glenda, every time they shared a touch of reassurance, it felt like a dagger to Douglas's heart. He was forced to play the role of the supportive brother, a silent witness to a union he knew was a sham, watching as another man unknowingly took on the responsibility of raising his own child. The electric connection he had once shared with Glenda in the dark corners of their secret meetings now felt like a noose, tightening with every vow she spoke to his brother. As Glenda and Raphael joined hands to recite their promises, the contrast between their internal worlds reached a breaking point. Glenda's voice was steady, her words carefully measured to maintain the illusion of perfection, even as she felt the eyes of both brothers burning into her, one with adoration, the other with a mix of longing and pain. She was walking a tightrope, manipulating the emotions of both men to keep them in her orbit while she secured her prosperous future. For Douglas, the ceremony was a torment of conflicting emotions. He was infatuated with a woman he could never claim, yet he was bound to her by a betrayal that had shattered the bond of brotherhood. The picture-perfect scene was nothing more than a shrouded truth, a stage set for a collision that no one could have foreseen. As the final kiss sealed their union and the guests erupted in applause, the storm clouds were already gathering on the horizon, waiting for the night to fall so they could unleash their fury upon a house built on lies. The reception had been everything the high society guests expected, an evening of exquisite mirth, rhythmic laughter, and soaring toasts to a future that seemed written in the stars. As the night wore on, the grand hall of the Cooper estate began to empty, leaving behind the fragrant remnants of white roses and half-filled crystal flutes. Raphael remained the quintessential host, his face still lit with a genuine warmth and a smile that seemed to reach his very soul as he saw off the final lingering guests. To him, the day had been unmarred, a perfect culmination of his dreams that left his heart light and his trust in his new bride absolute. He moved with the ease of a man who believed every promise made at the altar was a solid brick in the foundation of his royal legacy. But for Glenda, the mask was beginning to feel like a lead weight. As the adrenaline of the ceremony faded and the guests drifted away, her energy began to wane, the exhaustion of maintaining her role for so many hours finally seeping into her bones. She had played the part of the happy, expectant bride to perfection, but now, in the dimming light of the reception hall, the strain was starting to show in the tight line of her mouth and the way her eyes darted toward the shadows. She excused herself from the festivities, needing to find a moment of peace before the inevitable weight of her choices came crashing down. Her steps were heavy as she made her way toward the hotel suite, her mind clouded with the realization that the ticking time bomb she had planted was closer to detonating than she had ever imagined. The source of her dread was not just the exhaustion of the lie, but the growing volatile unrest in Douglas. Throughout the evening, she had felt his gaze, a mix of longing, pain, and a dangerous new jealousy, following her every move. Douglas was no longer the compliant secret lover. The reality of the vows she had spoken and the ring on her finger had pushed him to the brink of a snap resolve. She had seen the way his jaw tightened every time Raphael placed a hand on her belly, and she knew that the boyish energy he once possessed had turned into a dark, suffocating anger. The facade she had so carefully woven was cracking under the pressure of his guilt and his sudden desperate need to claim the life he could never have. As Glenda entered the quiet halls leading to their suite, the silence felt oppressive, a palpable sense of dread making her heart race against the lace of her gown. She knew that Douglas wouldn't stay away. The decisions they had made were now hurtling toward a collision that she could no longer orchestrate or control. She had used her charm and her vulnerability to keep him in her orbit, but the jealousy of a brother watching his own child be claimed by another man was a force her manipulation could no longer contain. The air was thick with the unspoken tension of a storm about to break, and as she closed the door to the room, she felt less like a queen entering her kingdom and more like a prisoner waiting for the reckoning to arrive. She was too drained to prepare for the confrontation, yet she knew that by morning, the house of cards she had built on a foundation of lies would be tested by a fire that would leave no one untouched. The silence of the luxury suite was a deceptive sanctuary, shattered the moment the door clicked shut behind Douglas. Glenda flinched at the sound, her shoulders slumping as she realized her brief respite had been an illusion. The air in the room instantly became thick, vibrating with the residual energy of a day spent in performance and the mounting desperation of the man standing before her. Douglas's eyes were wild, stripped of the boyish charm that usually softened his features. He looked like a man who had reached the absolute edge of his endurance. Without the buffer of the wedding guests or the soaring music of the reception, the truth of their betrayal felt like a living entity, cold and suffocating in the small space between them. Douglas didn't waste time with pleasantries. He took a step forward, his voice a strained whisper that carried the weight of a scream. He demanded to know what would happen to the life they had created, his words cutting through the carefully maintained silence like a blade. To Douglas, the sight of his brother's hand on Glenda's stomach throughout the day had been a torment beyond measure, a visual confirmation that the world believed his child belonged to another man. He was no longer willing to be a ghost in his own son's life, a silent observer to a future authored by Raphael. He demanded that they go to Raphael immediately, that the lies end before the sun rose on a life built on a fraudulent foundation. Glenda tried to muster the strength of her practiced composure, her tone remaining unervingly calm as she reminded him of the choices they had already made. She spoke of stability and survival, weaving a narrative where Raphael was the only shield capable of protecting the child and their futures. To her, Douglas's sudden moral awakening was a threat to everything she had calculated so precisely. It was a luxury she could not afford. She argued that it was too late to turn back, that the rings were on their fingers and the vows had been sealed. But her words only served to ignite the anger that had been simmering in Douglas all night, a fury born of the realization that she valued Raphael's empire more than the truth of their connection. The room crackled with a dangerous tension as their argument escalated, voices rising and falling in a rhythmic clash of desperation and resolve. Douglas spat the word stability back at her like a curse, accusing her of using his brother as a pawn while effectively erasing his own existence from their child's history. He pleaded with her to see the human cost of her deception, his voice cracking with the agony of a man who felt himself being erased. Yet Glenda's resolve remained a hardened stone. She had come too far from the modest neighborhood of her youth to let emotions unravel the security she had finally grasped. She whispered that they were trapped by their own choices, her eyes reflecting a cold resignation that offered Douglas no solace, only the chilling reality that they were hurtling toward a collision they could no longer avoid. Outside the suite, the hallway was a long stretch of silence that Raphael Cooper walked with a heart lighter than it had been in years. He had finally finished bidding farewell to the last of their wedding guests, his face still warm from the genuine smiles and handshakes of men who respected him. To Raphael, this walk toward the hotel room was the final transition into the life he had always envisioned, a royal legacy founded on the sacred union of marriage and the promise of the child Glenda carried. His mind was full of the future, of the son or daughter who would inherit the empire he had carved out of the grit of his past, and of the woman who had brought him a sense of peace he never thought possible. A soft smile played on his lips as he reached for the door handle, eager to reunite with his bride and savor the first quiet moments of their new life together. But as his hand hovered inches from the wood, a sound froze the blood in his veins, the sharp, jagged edge of raised voices erupting from within the room. Raphael stood paralyzed, the silence of the hallway now feeling like an oppressive weight as he strained to listen. The voices were unmistakable, Glenda's, filled with a cold, desperate resignation, and Douglas's, laced with a raw agony that Raphael had never heard from his younger brother. The words were muffled at first, but as the argument intensified, the full extent of the betrayal began to lay itself bare before him like a series of daggers to the chest. He heard Douglas demand to know what would happen to our child, the possessive weight of the words shattering Raphael's belief that the baby was his own. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Raphael pressed his ear to the door, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. He heard Glenda admit, in a voice stripped of all its bridal sweetness, that she had married him for stability, for the life he could provide, and to shield herself from the uncertainties of a world that had always been cruel to her. She spoke of their choices as a trap they had both walked into, confirming that the forbidden affair with Douglas was not a momentary lapse but a ticking time bomb that had been counting down to this very moment. Every word Raphael overheard was a confirmation that the two people he loved most, the brother he had protected and the woman he had worshipped, had conspired together to build his happiness on a foundation of lies. Raphael stood broken in the hallway, his tattooed hands trembling as the picture-perfect image of his life dissolved into a nightmare of deceit. The realization that his brother had looked him in the eye every day while carrying the secret, and that his wife had used her pregnancy as a weapon to secure his wealth, caused something inside him to break with a deep, agonizing crack. He was no longer the successful man of integrity the guests had toasted. He was a man deceived in the worst possible way, rooted to the spot by the enormity of a betrayal that left him with nothing but blinding rage and a profound sense of loss. Finally, his resolve hardened into a mask of cold devastation. He raised his hand, no longer a groom but a judge, and knocked on the door to signal that the moment of reckoning had arrived. The knock on the door was soft, yet it echoed through the suite like a gavel, silencing the desperate whispers of Glenda and Douglas instantly. Inside, the air turned to ice as they realized the shadow at the door was no longer a suspicion but a reckoning. When the door finally swung open, Raphael Cooper stood framed in the entrance, a mask of cold devastation carved into his features. His eyes, once soft with an adoring trust, were now twin voids of blinding rage and profound loss. The bond of brotherhood that had anchored the Cooper name for decades did not just fray, it shattered beyond repair as Raphael's gaze met Douglas's. There were no words, no apologies that could bridge the chasm of the full extent of the betrayal he had just overheard. Raphael stepped into the room, and the space seemed to shrink under the weight of his suffocating silence. He looked at them, his wife in her pristine white lace and the brother he had protected, and saw only destroyers of the life he had envisioned. The love that had been his greatest achievement was now the source of a deep, agonizing crack in his soul that he knew would never heal. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, trembling roar, demanding to know how they could look him in the eye while weaving a web of deceit so personal and profound. He turned his fury toward Douglas, the brother who had taken his place in his wife's bed and was now attempting to claim his child. Then his eyes shifted to Glenda, the woman who had traded his heart for the stability of his empire. The confrontation quickly spiraled out of control as the tension in the room reached its breaking point. Driven by a desperate, impulsive surge of grief and madness, Raphael lunged toward Douglas. The room exploded into a chaotic struggle, the sounds of their conflict echoing against the walls of the luxury suite. In a split second, a tragic and irreversible moment unfolded, an accident born of pure horror that no one could have predicted. Douglas fell, his body crumpling to the floor as the life drained from him in an instant. Glenda's scream pierced the morning air, a sound of raw agony as she rushed to Douglas's side, but the damage was done. In the violent upheaval of the struggle, the trauma proved too much for her own fragile state. The night of tragedy claimed her as well, leaving her lifeless beside the man she had truly loved. As the first light of dawn began to bleed through the curtains, Raphael stood frozen amidst the wreckage of his family. The morning's mourning had arrived with a haunting silence, broken only by the realization that he was now a widower and a fratricide. The room, once filled with the promise of a royal legacy, had become a tomb of shattered dreams and broken lives. Raphael was left to face the devastating consequences of secrets kept too long and trust broken beyond mending. By sunrise, the Cooper Empire remained, but its king stood alone in the ruins, haunted forever by the destructive power of betrayal and the high cost of a lie that had taken everything.